Welcome to Karuna Live. It is Saturday, May 27th, 2023, and this event is on shedding shame, growing compassion around gender and sexuality. My name is Miriam. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Madison, Wisconsin, which is traditionally and still the land of the Ho-Chunk people. And I'm so happy to be with you all. It's been almost a year since I did a Karuna Live. I did one last year for folks who identified as women, non-binary, or queer in June of last year. And it was so potent and powerful to explore gender and sexuality that way. And I had requests to offer something like that for everybody. So this is my belated response to that request. For folks who just came in, if you can put your pronouns and location in either your rename, so with your name, or in the chat, it's great to just have a sense of folks who are here. And welcome again. So Karuna training, some of you are not as familiar with Karuna training. Some of you have taken Karuna training. So I'm going to say a word about that. I'm going to introduce myself and say a bit about what I'm doing here. And then we'll have a short meditation, guided meditation. I'll give a talk and we'll do a practice together and then have a chance for sharing. This topic and these experiences are so much bigger than 1 hour's worth of time. And at the same time, we wanted to be able to give people a sampler, a flavor. So Karuna training is, thank you for sharing your info in the chat. Karuna training is a school, an informal school. I mean, it's a formal school, but it's not school like a university, where you can take all kinds of programs from little 1 hour Karuna Lives that happen monthly to 2 or 3 year training programs, where we work with mindfulness and compassionate methods to engage with ourselves and with others. And I'm one of the lead faculty. So we have 5 lead faculty for Karuna training, and we have a whole host of continuity faculty and mentors who support people in their training. And then we have lots of graduates of Karuna training and people who are taking Karuna training who are just interested. So it's a wide-ranging community. But mostly folks are drawn to Karuna training, I find, because they're looking for more communication skills and emotional skills for how to be with themselves and with their beloveds in their life, and increasingly how to be with the world as it is, which is a messy, fantastic, painful, beautiful place. Not just around gender and sexuality, although that's our specialty today. So that's my aspiration today, right, is that we create a space that's not necessarily safe, because I'm not sure I believe that safe spaces exist, but that I'm able to hold a space for you that's aligned enough for you to be able to learn some things, grow some things, whether you share those out loud or not. And I want to name, as a white cisgender woman, I'm a woman and I'm queer, but I'm also white and cisgender, meaning I identify with the gender I was assigned at birth. I've got some privilege and I have power as a teacher. So if I say anything that harms you during this program, or piques you, or even maybe you wouldn't say harm, but is painful in some way, I would really love to receive that feedback if you're able to. And take your time if you need time before you say it back, but please let me know. I always want to know. I have been with Karuna training. I took my first Karuna training program about 10 years ago when it first came to North America. Prior to that, it was in Europe. And I've been on faculty for the last few years. And I just love doing this kind of work together in groups. So a lot of this, the topic today around healing shame, is around the importance of our shared space together, whether or not, you'll hear me say this a few times, you say anything out loud. So you're still contributing to the collective field by being here. So you can leave your camera off and not say boo the whole time, and I will still believe that you are here and you're contributing, and I'll trust that you're receiving what you need to receive. And along those lines, if you have any access needs, so if you have anything that would help you to be more present and fully here, that would be great to know. You can either post those in the chat or send that private chat to me, or send it to everybody in the chat. And that might be, not everyone is familiar with access needs, but it might be a request you have from us. Like, for instance, my main access need always is to ask people not to move devices while the camera is on. You can move, but if you move the device, it can trigger my vertigo. And I've also gotten pretty good at looking away. And, like if I notice that someone is walking with a camera, I'll look away, but it's helpful for me if people think to turn off their camera before they move their device. So that's an access need that you can help me with. But maybe you're just, you had to eat some food before you could come in, or you have a headache today and it's hard to concentrate, or you need to stay off camera for whatever reason. If you want to share those things in the chat, those are welcome. That's a part of building our collective field together, is to know what people are bringing and remind us that we're all human beings, ourselves included. And if you don't have any things that you need to meet or have been meeting, or you don't want to share, that's fine too. But I just want to take a moment and pause and feel in to what you're bringing with you today. The questions or curiosity or concerns or care. Aspects of your identity that you worry get in the way for other people or for yourself. Really touching base with how you're coming in. Not just, I'm fine, I'm okay. But what's happening right now for you? And if you feel activated or scared or unsure or exhausted, it does not have to be what feels good. Although if you're feeling good, let yourself feel that too. And see if there's anything you need for that. You don't need to fix or change anything about how you are. If you're coming in with a backache and you realize you need a pillow, grab that pillow. And if any of those needs come up, or anything that you're taking care of that you want to share in the chat, you're welcome to. And that's true throughout the whole hour. So there's no statute of limitations on your needs. If they change or you want to state them later, you can. So along these lines, as we all have different needs that are met or not met, we're also a group of people who don't know each other for the most part. And we may have different experiences around gender and sexuality. Some of us carry a lot of tender survival trauma, and some of us carry more just a level of curiosity and maybe some hurt. And as I like to say, this is not oppression Olympics. So there's no like, I suffer more than you do. And, both things are true, that we all are affected by patriarchy and heteronormativity. We're all impacted by that internally and externally. And some folks are impacted more or more directly. So I just want to name that as a part of our understanding our group field, that generally the more situations you're in where you're oppressed directly or indirectly, that's going to show up in your body and in your experience. And so just a reminder that we're a mixed group, and that it's really important to hold that space with care, which I'm doing myself. And along those lines, a lot of what we do in Karuna training focuses on both personal transformation and also communal or collective transformation. And it's our hope that that work can also contribute to systemic or institutional level of transformation. And that's not our direct wheelhouse as an organization, right? So we do not work in lobbying or politics or trying to change things on a larger systemic level as an organization. Some of us do that as activists, but not as an organization. And I also want to name that that's still important. So what can happen when we go into wellness spaces and spaces that do focus on personal and communal is that sometimes we forget that there is also the systemic level of oppression, or we disregard it, or sort of pretend that if we just do the personal and communal, the systemic will somehow change, which is not true. We need all of those. And the personal and communal can affect institutional change, but we also need some of the top-down institutional change. And I think we can see that especially this week in Florida, where the NAACP actually has issued a travel advisory for people of color, especially Black folks, and other institutions have followed suit, other organizations, because trans rights are under slaughter, absolute wholesale slaughter in Florida. They have been for a while. And it's very explicit and overt. So we can do a lot of collective and personal work around that, and we need to, because we've internalized a lot of those messages, and something has to stop at that level, right? So both of those things are true. I just really wanted to name that in the space together. As a queer person, often when I'm talking about Buddhist teachings, we talk about what some of you may have heard of as non-dualism. So not opposing, opposite, Black or white, for instance. Not one, not two, non-dualism, that things are not so opposite each other. I often will also refer to that as non-binary, right? Which is a gender term. It's used for people's gender identity. But our whole existence is non-binary. The whole of our existence, all of us, is a very delicate, intricate, interdependent field of identity and experience. So we really want to lean into that. We want to lean into finding all of those delicate parts of our experience, especially that don't fit into the categories. Even if you identify as white, cisgender, heterosexual, right, sort of tick all of those boxes, that again, leaning into the delicate parts of our experience that we might shy away from, which by the way is something that's a part of the programming as white, cisgender, heterosexual men, right, is that you basically don't go to those tender places. That can help us to heal shame. So leaning into what is not normalized or standard about our experience and identity is very tender and often feels scary, and is super essential for starting to open up around the areas that we keep hidden and secret, which is where shame grows. I'm curious if anyone is willing to share, and this I can, again, stop recording if anyone wants me to, or you can put it in chat. I'll just read it out loud anonymously. But what are the ways that you have been, maybe still are told, not to talk about gender and sexuality? What are the implicit and explicit ways that you're told to keep things secret or private that feed shame, right? So the idea is that by not talking about these things, they feed our shame. So for instance, I'm not transgender, but my spouse is. And so having that much proximity to someone who's transgender for 16 years now, almost 17 years, I feel it like it's happening to me. I recognize it's not happening to me, right? I don't over-identify. I understand that my experience is different as a cisgender woman, but when I read those legislations, I feel it's like a tingling on my skin that starts to prick and tear. And it silences me. It starts to silence me. It starts to tell me not to talk about my spouse in public, not to talk about my own sexuality, right? So that gives that's a sideways message. It's not directly aimed at me, but that's the impact of it. So how do you receive that message from your beloveds, from the media, from the news? Yeah. I got the image of putting a tight lid on a hot pot. It's like a very tight lid on that, and that's going to feel really intense. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. Yeah, and the complexity of your wife's experience, and for whatever reason she's saying this, so the whole thing, all the complexity, your daughter, partner. Something I had thought to add into the newsletter, but then decided not to, was the really tricky experience when I was a teenager of coming out at the time as bisexual. And my mother, who was a widow, who was a middle-aged widow who had severe mental health difficulties that were unaddressed and untreated. And I was the only child left in the house. So she was in a lot of pressure at that situation, which I've only come to understand with age, of course. I came out as bisexual, and her first response was not as explicit as "don't tell anyone," but that was the like, "be careful who you tell." And I felt an immediate shaming and shut down, even though her response was protective, right? Her desire was for me to just be discerning and recognize not everybody's gonna see this the same way. And just how delicate, this is what I meant by the delicate interdependent tissue, right? The web around all of this. It took me many years to realize that was coming from a place of care. Also, not much information in her generation, as much information, but also that she was discerning something I wasn't discerning, and she didn't intend to shame me. So there are so many ways that shame can arise when other people don't intend to do it. And that's the most complicated part of the web, I think, is not to name again that the institutional, right, the shaming that's coming down the line that is intended, actually, the laws are intended to say, you don't exist, you're not worthy of this care. This is a quote from Sonia Renee Taylor that I really, really appreciate from The Body Is Not an Apology. I'm going to put it in the chat. The only reason we would need to erase someone's difference is because we still equate difference with danger or undesirability. Rendering difference invisible validates the notion that difference is the problem and not our approach to dealing with difference, right? So that was the implicit message my mother gave me, was like, protect your difference, rather than let's talk about how to navigate that difference. Right? She tried to, those were the tools she had. Like, just be careful how you talk about it with people. But how powerful is that when we can recognize our difference is not the problem? And in order to do that, we have to counter a lot of messages that say it is a problem, implicit and explicit, right? And different from what, of course, is really crucial. Different from the standardized norm, which is not to say that is what's normal, but what's fed to us is normal. So I just really wanted to name that with great care and tenderness and love for my mother, who died when I was 19. So we never got to resolve that or many things, but I see now the complicatedness of it. And also I can name that hurt. Both are true. Like, it hurt, and I see what she was doing with the limited tools she had in 1995, right? So what I would love us to do is to practice together, lead us through a guided practice. And after the practice, we can check in and see what arose. And that will be pretty much our time together. As I said, it's a short period of time. And I just really want to honor so far already that people have shared really tender, beautiful, personal things. And I so appreciate it. So appreciate it. That's big. It's already helped our collective field open up and just know that you're being felt, even if we're not talking too much about it and the complexity of it. So the practice that I'm going to introduce, some of you are familiar with this, is called 4-step practice. Another name for it is FEEL practice, FEEL, an acronym. And the reason why I'm offering this practice, we always offer a practice during the Karuna Lives. The reason why I'm naming it is because what shame shows us is a place that needs a lot of care, right? It's a place that we have neglected often, that others have neglected. We've internalized that. We've left that space in the dark, or we've been told that we can't share it. Others don't want to hear about it, or there's trauma there. So for whatever reason, we have isolated this part of ourselves and others have isolated it. And so to be able to just spend a little bit of time being with that feeling is tremendously healing. It takes time. It's not a quick fix, but it's a way to train ourselves to do the opposite of what we usually do, which is run the other way screaming, right? Say like, oh, that feels awful. I don't want to go there. And instead just to touch and stay a little bit longer. The other thing that we, and I say we, because I do this for sure, went through a whole round of it this week, is that we tend to get very story level and conceptual, and there's zero judgment about that. There's often a lot logistically to figure out and think about when it comes to being hurt and experiencing shame. But we can get caught in that level, right? The stories about how this happened, why it's happening, what we need to happen, and we don't feel it at the root. So what feel practice can help us do is feel it closer to the root. And the way it does that is by encouraging us to notice our felt sense experience of what's happening instead of the stories and the thoughts. So normally we put a lot of emphasis on stories and thoughts, and we're going to shift the emphasis down into kind of closer to the rawer place that is more about what can we smell, taste, touch, see, feel, hear, right? That kind of sensory level. And because a lot of us have trauma, a lot of us have small t and big T trauma, especially around gender and sexuality, I'm going to ask you to please pick something that's not your biggest struggle. Might be big struggle adjacent, like it's sort of related. So this could be a memory. It could be a thought that you have that recurs, right? You notice this thought keeps coming up or this memory keeps coming up. It could be that you're already pretty in touch and notice that whenever you interact with this family member or someone else, that a certain part of your body doesn't feel good. You start feeling nauseated, or your back aches. You start to get a pounding headache, right? Like every time this happens, I get this physical response. So we're just noticing, trying to look gently for something that's difficult, right? Not super easy, but at the same time, not the hardest thing ever. So we don't want to trigger you if we can help it. And I'll help you titrate the practice as best I can as we go along, in case you do pick something big or you discover something big underneath, which can happen. So the steps are that we'll find something, right? Find a sensation or an experience that we want to stay with. The second step is to explore through the senses, like I was describing, and I'll guide you through it. The third step is to also do something different than what we usually do, which is to bring it closer, to actually express compassion for ourselves in this part of our experience. So the way that shame can grow is that we've been rejected and we reject that part of ourselves too. We feed that rejection. So just by really embracing, holding close, we're giving ourselves some of the care that we might need. It's probably not all the care. We need care from others too, but it can help. And then equally, the last step, you let go. You recognize this is only part of our experience. It's not the whole. So finding, exploring, embracing, and letting go. That's the feel practice. And we'll take about 10 minutes. I'll guide you through it for 10 minutes. And then we'll have a chance afterwards to ask questions or share. Does anyone have any questions now, in case any of that was unclear or you're not sure? Or you're welcome to turn off your camera, look away. You can do this practice. A lot of people do it with their eyes closed. But if you're already feeling kind of activated and you're like, wow, okay, this is already bringing up a lot, you might want to leave your eyes open which can actually help you to not go too deep. And I'll make that suggestion again later, just in case. Find a comfortable position. I want to recommend you do a kind of pre-grounding before we get into the practice. So really feeling your seat. If you're lying down, feeling the side of your body or the back that's in touch with the ground. Giving a slow, gentle look around your space, turning and looking over your shoulder, if that helps. And the first step is to find. So already past the question earlier, finding if there's an experience that's coming up for you as I've been talking or as we've been talking. Experience or memory or thought or sensation that arises for you around shame and gender and sexuality. There might be a lot, so I'm asking you to pick one as best you can. If your whole system feels flooded, then tune into one part of your body, something that feels neutral, like your hand. If you are starting to feel like you're spacing out and you've forgotten what the assignment even is and you're not sure, then just tune into that quality of spaciness. Maybe open your eyes. And the second step, exploring with your senses. So not analyzing, not fixing, not interpreting, but just being genuinely curious. Is there a temperature to this? A weight? A color? A scent? Size? A texture? If you could touch this experience, what would the texture be? A speed? Are there any sounds? This could be sounds the experience is making or sounds that are just appearing in your auditory field. Can you see anything else about this experience? The shape? Patterns? Lightness or darkness? You may notice that your interpretive mind or fixing mind wants to come back in. Oh, if I'm seeing this, it means this is true. Just let that go as gently as you can and come back to what's happening now in your sensory experience. Again, if the intensity feels overwhelming, you can back it off a bit by opening your eyes. And if you're still feeling flooded, then you are welcome to break with the practice, stand up, walk around, reground yourself however you need. Out of our curiosity or exploring, we want to add some sense of compassion and care, the embracing. If this is a part of yourself that you've hidden for a while or an experience that feels hard to touch, maybe the best you can do is basically just make eye contact with the experience and acknowledge you are a part of my experience. And if you're able to, can you take your own hand of your experience? Can you say, I see you. I recognize you. I know that you're a part of me. Can you place a hand on that part of your body or head? Express some gentle presence, not fixing, just presence. You matter. I'm with you. I get it. Sometimes when we haven't cared for a place in ourselves, there's resistance, either from us or that place, prickliness. That's okay. If that's how that part of you feels, just acknowledge, I hear you, I feel you. It's all good. We don't need to become buddy-buddy. Just want you to know I'm here. And then equally important, the non-dual, non-binary. This is your experience and it's not the whole of your experience. So if your eyes have been closed, very gently reopening them. Staying in touch with what you've been exploring, also feel into the rest of your body. And if it's hard for you to feel inside your body, you can feel the outside, touching your body neutrally, just to make contact. Gently, slowly looking around your space. Remembering the whole of your experience, or at least a bigger whole than this part. Take some deep breaths if that feels good, slowly. If you need to make a sound, or a stretch, that's fine. And if you're willing, I would love to hear from folks about what your experience was, any questions that are up, challenging or positive, doesn't matter. And just to name first, with no shame at all for people who have shared, asking first from people who haven't shared, just to make sure everyone gets a chance to speak or share. And then we can come back around as well. So you can share via chat or unmute, and a reminder, I can turn off the recording at any time. And if you want to pass, that's also totally okay. I wish you all the deepest care and support. And please just take some time to reground yourself before we get off this call together. So feel your connection to the earth if you can, through your feet and seat, or your back or your side, depending on how you are. Really we lean into the elements a lot in Karuna training. So leaning into that sense of earth as support and nourishment. Ask yourself, what do I need leaving this call? So your needs coming in might have been different than now. Do you need a snack? Do you need a walk? Do you need a nap? Do you need to write some things down? I know all of you in some environment, so I'll see you again at some point. Please take care. Thank you for coming and sharing.